We do have a quorum with Councilmember Hauser, Allen, Mendez, Sepulveda, Sledge, Suara, Toombs, and Welch present. The meeting comes to order. First, I need to announce the public comment period that we have in the beginning of each committee and council meeting. Do we have anyone signed up? No, we have not. Okay. We will go on then to our resolutions. The first resolution we have today is RS 2023-2365 with Hancock and Roten. This is authorizes the Metropolitan Development Housing Agency to enter into a pilot agreement and accept payments in lieu of ad valorem taxes with respect to a multifamily housing project located at 333 Reno Vista Drive. Do we have anyone to move this forward? Second, okay. Is there any discussion or questions? Seeing no discussion or questions, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? The motion passes. The next item we have on our agenda is RS 2023-2366 with Parker and Roten. This authorizes the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency to enter into a pilot agreement and accept payments in lieu of ad valorem taxes with respect to a multifamily housing project located at 590 Joseph Avenue. Do I have anyone to move this forward? Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, may we have a vote? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. The third item on our agenda is RS 2023-2369 Van Rees, Roten, and Welch. It approves a $19,500,000 grant agreement between Metropolitan Government to the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee for the purpose of creating a housing catalyst fund using the American Rescue Plan Act funds from fund number 30216. Do we have a motion? Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Yes. Councilmember Allen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In fact, I have a couple of questions, but I'd love for someone from the Housing Division just to talk about what this fund will do. And my understanding was the goal was for it to sort of be a strike fund to be able to grab existing affordable housing that was in danger of being lost. And is that included in the description?
Do we have someone just? Hannah is there. Hi. All right. I think you're on.
Hello. Hi, I'm Hannah Davis from our Housing Division. And to answer the council member's question, yes, that is still the intent. I'm very excited to bring this to you all tonight in honor of your last council meeting. As you'll recall, in December of 21, you approved RS 2021-1260 in authorizing the use of American Rescue Act funds to create a sustainable housing fund that will live outside of Metro and be able to act, as you so eloquently said, as a strike fund. And over the last 18 months, we have brought an excellent team on through a competitive RFP process that has been essential in our ability to develop this fund structure. So the resolution before you approves a grant contract with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee for the remainder of the funds. We're lucky to have the CEO, Hal Cato, with us here tonight. And this will initiate the next phase of that fund development. The experience that this team has brought has been really essential for us to develop this new tool. As a reminder, this is to supplement the existing housing tools we have, but really to be able to react to the real estate market in terms of timing, and the terms. And so that team is here tonight. Michael Friedman-Schnapp from Forsyth Advisors, who's a new to us face, and then two familiar faces with Mick Nelson and Ed Henley.
Great. And I recognize that there is an amendment to this bill. We need to move the amendment.
Move the amendment.
Okay. Is there anyone here to speak on the amendment? Okay. Where are you?
Console.
Sorry. Okay.
This is a simple housekeeping amendment. It attaches the exhibit that was left off of the original, the exhibit to the agreement.
Okay, so it didn't change anything. It just cleaned it up.
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Yes. Councilman Anderson.
Move the amendment.
You're on.
Thank you, Chair. Would that be the budget detail? Is that the one that was left off? Because it did say that the grant budget was attached, and I did not see that. Is that the one? Yes. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? The motion passes. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. You're open.
Thank you. If I could ask two more questions. One, is there any specificity on how long affordability will be required? And is there any possibility of using community land trust under this model? That may be a Hannah question or someone else back there. Okay. Or Angie.
Yeah, Angie's coming on up.
Hi, good evening. I'm Angie Hubbard, Housing Director, Metro Planning. I'm going to start, and then if you don't mind, if I could invite Michael from Forsyth Advisors. But this is intended to be a short-term debt product that's going to be taken out by a longer-term funding source like the Barnes Fund or a LIHTC. So that's where the affordability restrictions will really attach. But I'm going to let Michael explain more detail about how that will work.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Friedman-Schnapp. I'm from Forsyth Street Advisors. We're part of the team, along with Nelson Community Partners and Pillars Development at Henley, who were part of the team that won the competitive bid to serve as the fund managers for this. And we're really excited to be partnering with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. To the council member's question, we're going to be adopting, as it states in the exhibit to the legislation, we're going to be adopting an impact strategy for the fund, which is going to lay out all the things that we need to balance, the level of affordability that we're targeting with the fund, the different credit criteria that we need to maintain, because this is going to be a short-term lending fund. We're going to revolve the capital as quickly as possible. And the things that are really going to lay out the affordability requirements are going to be things like the Barnes Fund, THDA, the other typical mechanisms that are used in Nashville to finance affordable housing. And so that's where the affordability requirements are going to come. At the front end, we're going to do as much analysis as we can to figure out, is there a reasonable prospect of being taken out by one of those, because we want the city's money to be able to be used again in the future. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
Thank you. One final question. And will y'all be working with MDHA on their project-based rental assistance model? Because they had gone through and developed a list of all the ones that may be expiring and trying to jump on those before they turn into luxury apartments or whatever. So is that on your radar as well?
Yeah, we would love to. I really appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and we would love to partner with them on identifying those properties and trying to triage them.
Great.
Just to be clear, though, this is a lending fund, and so it's not going to own any of those properties. It can work with mission developers who are going to bring those properties back into regulation.
Gotcha. You can just catch them before they get away from us and pass them on. Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Councilmember. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Oh. You're on.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited about this because I see what it can do in terms of a lot of minority and small businesses actually looking for funds to be able to leverage the Barnes Fund, and I think this loan will do a great job. Some of my question is already being asked, but I wanted to find out when I was looking at it, it says there will be an investment committee that will be working with this. What is the composition of that committee? How is that made up? Is that something that we get to pick, or is it the fund managers that does that? And also the same thing for the impact strategy development that will be put together. Do we get to see that before it's finalized so we can make sure that the criteria meets some of the things, objectives of what we would like to see in an affordable loan criteria? And then the last question is, when I was looking at the agreement with the Community Foundation, is a 2-year agreement, and my understanding is that this is supposed to be a revolving loan, meaning that the earnings will be in there and then we'll continue to give more loans. So what happened after 2 years? Who administers that program, and what do we do from there?
Can someone speak to this?
Yes, thank you. For both the investment committee and the impact strategy, those will intentionally be part of the sign off from our housing directors. So you'll see that language built into the exhibit, and that's because we want to make sure all the new tools that we're developing align with our housing strategy. So one thing that's important as we do increase kind of our toolkit is that we have the flexibility through the housing director's leadership to be able to understand what gap each tool is filling, and then be able to make adjustments as new tools come online, and we want to make sure that each is as effective and efficient as it can be. Can you remind me of the last question about the Community Foundation?
The 2 years.
Oh, yes, that's a typical grant contract agreement that the language was given to us through Metro Legal. Obviously, the relationship is going to last beyond that 2-year time frame, and the mechanism for that ongoing monitoring is through the housing director's annual signature and then the report that's provided to council.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
as a follow-up to the first question, and thank you, and I think that we don't want to create any bottleneck, and I think we want the departments, and you have been doing a great job. But I know that one of the issues we've always come up with when it comes to affordable housing and things like that is the small businesses, the minority businesses, and how the structure is in such a way that it does not exclude them in any way. So how do we make sure that that final document is presented either to the Housing Fund or to the Affordable Housing Committee or something before it goes into operation? I don't want to say we have to approve it before it goes in, but I think I will be interested in knowing what are the criteria that we develop before we implement it.
Great. And I'll have Michael come back up to speak to the products that were developed. But that was one of the initial phases of the research that they did, was to try to identify gaps in what was standing in the way of our housing production and the growth of our housing development market. So I'll let Michael speak to some of the information that went into developing one of the products that specifically focused on that.
Great, thank you. We spoke with we had about 24 conversations with different mission developers, CDFIs that are active, as well as small emerging developers, including several MBE developers, and a presentation to the Red Academy, which is exclusively focused on emerging MBE developers. And so what we heard, things that are similar to the other cities that we work in, which are that there's requirements from financial institutions for guarantees that in order to give loans to emerging developers, that they're not satisfied because people don't have enough equity in their business and they're starting out and they may not have generational wealth to back them up. And so one of the products that we'd like to be able to offer, which has been very successful in our New York fund, is offering pre-development loans to folks that are recourse to them as a business or to the project entity that they're developing, which will not require extensive guarantees, and we're willing to take that risk. That will remain, because those loans are relatively small relative to the acquisition loans, we're comfortable with taking that risk, and it parallels work that we've done in New York, where our fund exclusively lends to nonprofits, MBEs, and WBEs. And so by being able to give that pre-development loan, folks will get the capital that they'll need to move their development along earlier when they're not as well capitalized.
Thank you. That's one of the things that I was hoping that the Catalyst Fund will do. And so the question is answered. Thank you.
I have a question. Please don't go away. Yeah. So as I was listening to you, let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly. So this fund would be sort of the gap fund to get them started with the intent that other funding would take out your loan. Is that correct? And then you also mentioned a possibility of a third product for those that need that would be a long-term loan throughout the project?
So that is correct as to the intention is to be short-term lending for the initial products. It's acquisition loans to acquire property at higher advance rates than banks would otherwise and CDFIs are able to do. And then the second one is the pre-development loan that we discussed. The third one is a bridge for grants, which is often an issue in that grants are often reimbursement based or can only come in at closing. And so we've found in our other funds that this is a really helpful thing to do, particularly because some CDFIs are able to take that risk, but they're not able to do it at the size of the grant relative to their balance sheet. And so because this will be large enough to be able to take that risk. The longer term investment that would really, this is not the Amazon fund, right, where they're making long-term subordinate loans that are intended to get more long-term money into it. That could be a future thing, but we need to get the short-term component of the fund up and running and then, build out from there.
And is this to fund both rental properties and properties to be sold or not?
It would be for income restricted housing for both rental and for sale. And that's, yeah.
So it could be some combination. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mendez. Okay, let me find you. Where are you?
Thanks for all this information. The talk about the program in other cities makes me ask if you've got information about what the loss rate has been when you do this in other cities.
That's a great question. So the New York City Acquisition Fund, which is the main and longest fund that we've run, has had 3 loans that have run into repayment issues during the life of it. And so we were able to have recovery on all of those. And so our net loss rate over it is 25 basis points or 0.25% of the capital deployed over time.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Any against? Any abstain? The resolution passes. Okay, and the last one we have on our agenda is RS 2023-2370 with Roten and Welch, amends RS 2022-1860 to change the implementation strategy for the collective or shared equity housing activity from an RFP to a designated set aside in the Barnes funding round. Would someone like to speak to this? Oh, first we need to move it forward. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Yes, do we have Ms. Hubbard?
Hello again. Thank you for the opportunity for letting me explain this. This is a really easy amendment. We're not changing the activity or the funding in any way. We're still intending to create shared equity type model housing to fund new construction. What this is changing the delivery model. When we did this last year, we had not yet fully experienced the RFP process. Now that we've gone through that, we feel like really the Barnes is the best avenue. As we've continued to have discussions around shared equity, we find that really the nonprofit sector is the right sector that participates in this, going through Barnes. And also we've been able to attach to it a sizable Metro tax delinquent property, which goes through the Barnes Fund, that we can make that available and require that be placed in a land trust as part and to complement the program. So really, we'll be able to get these funds out the door within the next month or so and under contract, come back to council by the end of the calendar year.
Great. Mara?
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the explanation. I have 2 quick clarifying question. Since this will be going to the bonds fund, I want to make sure that it's not impacting the 30 million that is allocated to bonds by itself, that it's not part of that, it's in addition to that 30 million.
It is in addition to the 30 million that we were allocated through the regular budget process.
Thank you. And then the second question is about the 500,000 piece that is supposed to be for awareness in the minority community. I know this has been on for some time, so have we started that program at all?
So that is actually having to go through procurement because the Barnes Fund is not structured for that type of activity. And that type of activity is more what our RFP process is intended to do than what we're looking to do with the shared equity. So that one is moving, but it's still going through the RFP process.
Okay, so that will be separate and we'll be doing that. Okay, all right, thank you.
But we will require whoever does the shared equity new construction to work with the provider through that network so that we are actually connecting people that participate in that to the houses that we're funding to create.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. Director Hubbard, you answered most of my questions I was going to ask. I did want to ask, since this is 9.5, is that the max award amount, or are y'all looking for multiple awards in this round or in this set aside?
That's the maximum amount, but we will be open to multiple awards to see how the proposals come in.
So you would potentially have an award where you attach this tax delinquent property you mentioned, but then there could be other awards that didn't have a tax delinquent property set on it. Maybe that applicant was coming in with another property. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you. Nashville had set up the housing fund as sort of the administrator of our official community land trust. Does that put them in the position to work with the Barnes Fund on this and be the administrator that holds the land, or how will that relationship work or not work?
We do want to make this fund and this property available through a competitive process.
Gotcha.
We will ask the proposers to tell us how they're going to make this part of a land trust.
Gotcha. Will we require experience in doing that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstain? The motion passes. Thank you. And that's the end of our affordable housing meeting for today.